You're holding a seed in your palm, tiny thing, dry, almost weightless. Today, you'd flick it into a garden bed, water it, maybe forget about it for a week. But imagine you're standing in the Jordan Valley about 11,000 years ago. And that seed isn't a hobby, it's a gamble with your hunger. Your children are watching your hand. The old people in your group are watching the sky. The ground is cracked in places, damp in others, and every decision matters because winter doesn't care what you intended. If you eat the seed now, you survive the day. If you bury it, you might survive next season. Might. That's the insane part. The first farmers weren't planting certainty. They were planting calories they desperately wanted to eat into dirt that might give them nothing back. Not a decision, not a plan. Just a terrifying bet that somehow changed the species. Agriculture began as delayed hunger. You live in a world where seeds feel almost invisible. They're inside burger buns, cereal boxes, popcorn bags, oat milk cartons, and those little packets at hardware stores with smiling tomatoes printed on the front. You don't look at a bagel and think, that's a survival technology. You don't pour rice into a pot and feel the weight of 10,000 years. For you, planting is calm. It's springtime. It's backyard videos. It's someone on the internet naming their sourdough starter like it pays rent. For ancient humans, seeds were unstable little survival devices. A wild wheat seed could shatter off its stalk before you even reached it. A drought could cook the soil. Birds could strip a patch in one morning. Storage pits could rot. Mice could turn months of work into crumbs in a single night. And still, people kept doing it. That's what makes this story so strange. Humans didn't learn to plant because farming was easy. They learned because the old world of hunting and gathering was becoming unpredictable in new ways. And seeds offered something dangerous but powerful. A future you could hold in your hand. What this video reveals is that humans didn't simply discover farming one bright morning. They stumbled into a brutal survival experiment where planting seeds forced them to invent storage, settlement, cooperation, property, ritual, and a new relationship with time itself. The first danger was simple. Wild seeds were built to escape you. Before domestication, many grasses had brittle rachises, meaning the seed heads naturally broke apart when ripe. That's great for the plant. It scatters its babies into the dirt. It's terrible for a hungry human trying to collect dinner. At Ohalo II, a 23,000-year-old site on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists found grinding stones and tens of thousands of charred plant remains, including wild barley and wheat. Picture someone crouched in smoke and dust, scraping tiny grains from husks, with hands already split from stone tools and cold water. You're not harvesting neat golden fields. You're racing birds, wind, and gravity for seeds smaller than your fingernail. And if you arrive 2 days late, the field has already thrown your food onto the ground. But what happens when the sky turns against you? Around 12,900 years ago, the Younger Dryas began. A sudden cold period that lasted more than 1,000 years and disrupted climates across the Near East. At Abu Hureyra in modern Syria, archaeologist Andrew Moore and later researchers documented a shift from broad-spectrum foraging toward heavier reliance on cultivated rye and other plants during this stressful period. Imagine a camp beside the Euphrates, where people once gathered pistachios, hunted gazelle, and moved when the land thinned out. Then the familiar rhythms start failing. The useful plants retreat. The animals change routes. A seed patch near camp suddenly isn't just convenient, it's insurance. It's a way of telling hunger, come back later, we're trying something. Now here's the one you won't see coming. Planting made food more vulnerable, not less. A hunter-gatherer can move when a valley fails. A planter has to stay close enough to weed, water, watch, harvest, and defend. At Jerf El Amar in northern Syria, dating to roughly 9,500 to 8,700 BC. Archaeologists found communal buildings, storage structures, and evidence of cereal processing before fully developed village farming. That means people were already tying themselves to places because seeds demanded attendance. Picture the danger. Your food is no longer running across the plain as gazelle or scattered through forests as nuts. It's sitting in one place, green and obvious, under every bird's eye and every neighbor's nose. Planting didn't remove risk, it concentrated risk. So what did they do? They turned memory into technology. The central survival response wasn't just the seed. It was knowledge, knowing which plants came back, which soils held moisture, when rains arrived, how deep to bury grain, how to protect sprouts, how to store the harvest, and how to recognize the difference between wild plants and the strange new ones that behaved better around humans. Failing at that knowledge could kill you quietly. Not instantly, not dramatically, just slowly as the storage pit got emptier and the children stopped playing as much. At Çatalhöyük in central Anatolia, occupied around 7,100 to 5,950 BC, archaeologists found dense houses, storage bins, ovens, and plant remains that show how deeply food production shaped daily life. People weren't just tossing seeds around and hoping. They were building a world around keeping grain edible. They plastered floors. They sealed spaces. They cooked and stored and guarded. And the evidence is physical, not imaginary. The Ain Ghazal statues from Jordan, dating to around 7,000 BC, show people in early farming communities already investing labor into shared symbolic life. These plaster figures weren't farming tools, but they tell you something powerful. Once food demanded settlement and cooperation, humans built meaning around the places that fed them. Seeds needed more than dirt. They needed a society strong enough to wait. But here's the question. What did planting accidentally create besides food? Time. That sounds too soft, but it's huge. When humans depended only on immediate foraging returns, life moved with animals, seasons, and ripening plants. Planting stretched the mind forward. You had to imagine a meal that didn't exist yet. You had to protect an invisible future underground. That may be one of the most underrated revolutions in human history. A buried seed turned patience into a survival skill. It made calendars matter. It made storytelling practical. Someone had to remember where last year's best stand grew. Someone had to tell a child, don't eat all of it, save some. Someone had to say, when this star rises, the rains are close. That's not just farming. That's culture becoming a storage device. And honestly, it's wild to think about. The first planted field may have looked boring, just mud, little shoots, people bending over in the heat. But underneath that scene, human consciousness was changing. The future became something you could plan for, argue about, inherit, lose, steal, bless, and fear. A seed didn't just grow into a plant. It grew into tomorrow. At Ohalo II, around 23,000 years ago, researchers found a brush hut settlement preserved by the Sea of Galilee, with grinding stones and charred remains of wild cereals. The physical detail matters. People were processing tiny grains long before farming villages existed. The implication is sharp. Humans were already experimenting with plants while still living as hunter-gatherers. At Abu Hureyra, occupied before and after the Younger Dryas, plant remains show a long transition from gathering wild foods toward cultivating cereals like rye. The site preserves the pressure point beautifully. Environmental stress, shifting diets, and people leaning harder on plants that could be encouraged near home. Farming didn't drop from the sky. It crept in through necessity. At Jerf el Amar, roughly 11,500 years ago, Excavations led by Danielle Storder revealed communal buildings and evidence of cereal processing in a pre-pottery Neolithic community. Think of people storing grain before metal, before wheels, before written contracts. The implication is that cooperation came early because seeds created shared problems no single person could solve alone. At Netiv Hagdud in the Jordan Valley, dating to about 9,500 BC, archaeologists found early evidence of cereal exploitation and village life linked to the pre-pottery Neolithic A. You can picture mud brick structures, stone sickle blades, and hands blackened by chaff and ash. The point isn't that these people instantly became farmers. It's that the boundary between gathering and growing was getting blurry. At Jarmo in the Zagros foothills of Iraq, excavated by Robert Braidwood and dating to around 7,000 BC, archaeologists found an early farming village with domesticated wheat, barley, goats, and sheep. That combination matters. Plants and animals were being pulled into the human orbit together. By then, the seed gamble had become a new way of life. One of the clearest ways to understand this shift comes from archaeologist Melinda Zeter of the Smithsonian Institution. In her 2011 work on the origins of agriculture in the Near East, Zeter argued that domestication wasn't a single invention or a sudden revolution. It was a long process shaped by human choices, ecological opportunity, and repeated interaction with plants and animals. That matters because it makes the story more human. Nobody woke up and said, "Let's invent civilization before lunch." People made small choices under pressure. They dropped seeds near camps. They returned to useful patches. They favored plants whose seeds stayed on the stalk longer. They cleared competitors. They protected what fed them. Over generations, those choices changed the plants themselves. Wild wheat and barley slowly became more dependent on human harvesting and planting. And at the same time, humans changed too. Not genetically overnight, socially, mentally, emotionally. A group that plants must coordinate labor, share knowledge, defend stores, divide work, teach children, and remember seasons accurately. Farming wasn't just calories. It was a new social contract with the landscape. The deeper why wasn't laziness or genius. It was relationship. Humans and plants started shaping each other. And your body still understands this more than you think. You know that quiet satisfaction when you stock your pantry? When the fridge is full? When rice, pasta, flour, beans, or cereal sit on a shelf and some ancient part of your brain relaxes? That feeling isn't random. It's old. Your brain evolved in worlds where food wasn't guaranteed, where a stored surplus could mean surviving winter, drought, illness, pregnancy, injury, or a failed hunt. The modern grocery run is comfortable, sure, but the relief you feel when there's food at home comes from a survival system much older than supermarkets. That's why empty shelves feel weirdly threatening, even if you're not starving. That's why people buy extra before storms. That's why a full cupboard feels like safety, not just convenience. You're not being dramatic. You're hearing an echo from people who once stared at buried seeds and hoped the future would answer. The seed in your pantry and the seed in their hand are connected by the same fear. Will there be enough later? So go back to that hand in the Jordan Valley. A seed rests in the palm, small enough to lose in a fold of skin, big enough to rearrange human history. Around it, there's hunger, weather, birds, mice, cold snaps, dry soil, children waiting, elders remembering. Someone says to eat it now. Someone else says to bury it. And in that impossible little argument, the modern world begins to flicker. Not as cities, not as empires, not as bread in plastic bags. Just a person kneeling in dirt, choosing to trust a future they can't see. From Ohalo's grinding stones to Abu Hureyra's stressed harvests, from Jurf El Amar's storage rooms to Çatalhöyük's crowded houses, the story keeps repeating. Seeds taught humans to wait. Waiting taught humans to plan. Planning taught humans to build. And every time you hold food for tomorrow, you're part of that story. Civilization began when hunger learned patience.